Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Finding North, coming to you again on Sunday. It actually feels like spring today here, at least for me in Germany. Fahim, I don't know how it is in London and the UK, but we had continuous 16 degrees for the last 2 days. It's, the birds are coming out, you have blue skies, and it really feels like, it's probably too early to say we are out of winter, but days are slightly getting longer, days are slightly getting brighter, and it really lifts my mood and my energy. And I'm really pumped to actually hopefully soon get into springtime.
Good, good. Yeah, maybe a little bit too early for the UK random weather machine. We are getting pockets of sunlight, a bit of rain here or there, but you know what it's like, right? As soon as you see 5 minutes of sun, everyone's thinking we're out with a
Yeah,
barbecue, and then you get reminded in the evening
absolutely.
with the rain. But I think there is definitely a slight turn in weather, but I'm gonna just hold tight for a couple of more weeks before I.
Not to get too excited, so you're not gonna get too disappointed. But yeah, I think it's we can confidently say that we are moving out of winter towards spring. At least that's how it feels here, and
Yes.
I'll take that the end light at the end of the tunnel in all of that situation. I think having some sort of sign of being able to spend more time outside and so on, I think is a good thing. Good.
Exactly.
So today we said we're gonna cover another prediction of our good friend Scott Galloway. So the next one that we want to cover today is actually what he calls the dispersion of education. So obviously he comes a lot from a US perspective. That's something I think we need to take into consideration. The educational system in the US is quite different to, for example, Germany. I think also different to the UK, but maybe a little bit more similar, especially when it comes to how expensive certain types of educations are. It's something to take into consideration. But I thought what we're gonna do, I thought of have three main thoughts around this: what the
Mhm.
future of education might look like, and also why the state of education is as it is right now. And then we just exchange some thoughts of how we have experienced our education in the past, if we would do things differently nowadays, how we still maybe try to learn and enhance our knowledge nowadays. I think that it makes for a really good topic, and I think a topic that is relevant to many people, everyone who's into continuous learning, who has kids, or maybe thinking about doing another good degree to some sorts. It's a good topic, especially since we have so much time, and that hopefully leads many people to spend hours and hours studying new things. Cool. So I think to start off with, to cover just the current state of education, I was thinking about it the other day. Why the educational sector still works as it does. And I think the way I was sort of breaking it down in my head is that um, higher end education has always been one where the universities have put artificial constraint on the supply that is actually there, right? There were only a limited number of seats per class, per semester that people could get into. And usually, especially the higher you wanted to go up in terms of the level of the institutional body, the better the university, the harder it would be to get in, because there was a limited number of seats. The more competition it would create for people to just perform at their best, because they know they have to be better than their peers, first of all, to get in, but then
Yeah.
also while they study, because at the end of the day, if you have sort of a constraint on the supply, that creates competition. At the end of the day, what it creates is value. It either creates value for the people who come out of it, because then they're very small numbers, so they can ask for you know more compensation, because they're part of this constrained class of highly regarded talent. And it also creates value for the universities, because they know if we control that small group, we can charge a premium for it, because people want to be, it's sort of this um, uh, um, well, it's not, is it the chicken and egg, but it's like, if the university keeps the number of seats small, there's only a small number of people who will get there, and then also a small number of people getting out of the university, so they can then ask for a lot of money in return
That's
for the
right.
companies who want to seek that talent. And I think this is, I don't know if is it fair to say, in your opinion, that, what's your thoughts on that? I sort of, for me, break it down, that this, like, artificially limiting the supply, putting constraints on how many people graduate from really good universities, creates competition, and obviously competition usually creates value.
Mhm.
What's your,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
any thoughts?
No, it's good. It's good the way you've broke it down. I think ultimately, um, it is a filtering system that then allows employers, or after your phase of your learning,
Mm,
to allow others to know um, how to score you, right? Or what
yeah.
is the criteria, the entrance criteria in. Otherwise, there's abundance of XYZ. But I think in terms of the limiting supply, and thus creates value because of not much available. I think just education, the higher education, university and college and beyond, etc. Let's not make mistake about it. It's big business, right? It is a lot of money involved, from government subsidies to international fees that are being paid, etc. So it is a massive, massive business. And when the money keeps coming in, you know, you don't mess with the system, right?
Mm,
Only until when people start to realize that actually maybe there's a different way of ultimately doing this, etc. And then the supply, the demand sort of dries out a little bit.
mm.
That is when these institutions will really reinvent themselves. But until the money's coming in and it's a big money maker, cash cow, people will be like, let's keep on this train, right?
Yeah, it's gonna be also interesting to see what now the pandemic's gonna do to all of this, because I think now, if I put myself back into the times when I got into university, and luckily when I studied in the UK, I had to pay, because and quite a bit of money in comparison to what I paid in Germany, which was almost
Yeah.
nothing. I would really now sit there and, like, sitting in front of a laptop like we do right now and watching online classes. I can do that on Coursera. And then on
Yeah.
Coursera, I probably get like a high quality education at the end of the day as well, but I just pay for the certificate. How is that really different than being enrolled in an actual university, but also not having the classroom experience and the campus experience? If so, why would you then pay £40,000 for like a bachelor
I
degree?
think also, yeah, no, and ultimately it is how it's being perceived and what is the value. So, as an example, I think we come from a generation, the that influenced by the industrial revolution, where what, education was key. You
Mm,
got to become a doctor or an engineer type of mindset, right? And you needed that piece of paper for the outside world to take you seriously.
yeah.
um, yeah, and now that piece of paper is being questioned, right? Because what is being valued more is hands-on experience, is portfolio. What have you actually done? Do you have
Mm,
examples of work, etc.? So I think in many sectors, the maybe the higher education certification is probably a question mark. But I think ultimately, like in the medical, as an example, maybe in the technology world, obviously
yeah.
the games have changed. Your portfolio and your experience speaks volumes compared to certification, and a 16-year-old person can compete with it's a level playing field. But I think there are certain other sectors. I'm just thinking out loud, like medical, for example, medical surgery, you know, things like that. I think that is a discipline that
Yeah.
You can't just go and experiment,
We all have an interest that those people go to university, get an actual degree, and not just like, hey, look at my portfolio of surgeries I performed on.
The failure there is fatal, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in the other sectors, failure is seen as a learning opportunity. So I think there will be definitely education, and those institutions are not going to disappear. They're going to focus around where it's really adding value. And also, like I said, like the generation that we've been brought up in, getting the degree or getting the piece of paper was so important, and it opened up doors. But we all
Yeah.
know, let's be honest, after we got our first job, you know, it only
No one
helped you get
asks
your first job.
anymore for you
Nobody
to see and see
asks.
proof. Yeah.
Exactly. So I mean, imagine back then when we were studying, you know, if we had an idea of starting a business, like back then, starting a business was like, oh my God, you know, why would you do this? You know, it's a silly thing to do, etc. Whereas now, more and more people are being encouraged at whatever age they are to be more entrepreneurial, to start businesses, and all of
Absolutely.
that.
Let me actually interrupt you there, because I think you mentioned a few things, and I rather now go through all of them one by one,
Okay.
because otherwise we just gonna maybe miss out on them. And I really want to pick up on that whole portfolio idea. So let's definitely go back to this, because you said something interesting at the beginning in terms of, you know, that this has been sort of started at the Industrial Revolution. I think one thing has really changed, you know, on a macro level over the last 20 to 30 years, or maybe even longer than that, is like, you know, back in the days, you could really distinguish yourselves to become like a white collar worker by having a university degree, because
Yeah.
the majority of the market was still blue collar workers. So there was really like a change, like, okay, if you want to move into that sort of cohort, you need to have a university degree. Nowadays,
Sure.
look at it in Europe and the Western world. Everyone almost is like a, you know, there's a much larger amount of white collar worker who go to university.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
because there's also much more, you know, I made the argument initially, there's a constraint on the supply, but that's for the high level, you know, Ivy
Yeah.
League sort of top level schools. But in general, it's way more universities there, way more courses, way more seats. So the paper actually becomes less valuable
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, right? It's like almost everyone can go to university nowadays and get a degree. So I think that has definitely changed, and will change ultimately what people perceive the value of a university degree. And hence I would question, like, why then still in some areas pay so much money for it, right? If it's almost like omnipresent, you know, you can go and get a degree in almost every field everywhere in the world. So the value behind it is not what it used to be, that it will differentiate yourself that much than it used to be. And hence the question, it backs to us, like, do you still need to go to university, or can you just go learn certain skills? And that was your second point. Unless it's medical or maybe law or maybe, you know, some engineering things where you know, like, okay,
Engineering.
I should know some basics, otherwise, you know, I don't want that plane that I'm going to help to construct crash on its way to, I don't know, Dublin or something. So yeah, what's your views on
Yeah.
that?
I think you're right. I think your point around these phases of differentiation is so important. All of a sudden, when something becomes a commodity, I remember when I was going to university, even though I was doing computer science and things like this, the the years after I graduated, the market was just flooded with so many
Mm,
graduates, you know. And then how do you differentiate yourself? Well, if you had a summer job working in a technology company, boom, you know, you're in. Then I was very fortunate enough to, my degree had a, what we call in the UK, a sandwich course. So you spend 1 year in an industrial placement.
working, yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, working, and then you come back and you finish your final year.
Mm,
And what used to happen, it became so competitive, or so common even doing 1 year, is that many students would work through the summer, would do an industrial placement, would work over Christmas, etc. So by the time they had graduated, they had got a degree and 2 years worth of experience, right?
Yeah.
and and it's just a natural phenomena that's not going to change going forward. Is how do you stand out whenever a route to something become commoditized, right?
Mm,
And I think now there's a realization in many of our sectors is that, okay, well, to stand out, well, if it's all about delivering impact and value, let me find a different way of doing it, right?
100%.
So starting up a business, or learning yourself, learning new skills, and actually preaching it. So I think the whole many sectors, certification is going to be less valued, but the portfolio is going to
Mm,
be where it really counts. I think that's definitely an element there. Um, and I think the other sectors, like we talked about, there's definitely going to be value in it. So I'm just thinking out loud now. Is there any value in the whole education, higher education, things like that? Well, I think inherently, people and human beings are lazy by nature, right?
mm,
They are lazy. If you don't push them outside their comfort zone, they don't really realize, one doesn't realize their potential. So I think we can all agree that going through the whole university process, of course, there was some social aspect to it. You made friends, and many of them may have stayed, and you made lifelong connections. Number one, but I remember when there are these tests
mm.
there, whether the test is the right thing or not, whether you believe whether it's valuable or not, it forces you to focus and have discipline and do something and come
100%.
out with something. So it's following a certain process. Whether you agree or disagree with what it's trying to achieve, it gives you the ability to hone in and see whether you can do something, whatever it
Let's
may
actually
be.
pick up on this one, because I think it's an important one. If I look back at my study, so my bachelor's degree and then my master's, I definitely do not want to miss out. I would do my bachelor's every time again, because as you said, it's not just about the degree, it's not just about the piece of paper, but it's usually the point where you move out of the house for the first time, you live on your own, you sort of
Yeah,
reinvent
yeah.
yourself from a personality point of view, because often, you leave the people who you usually grew up with sort of behind, because you don't necessarily go to university together. So you're thrown into a new social construct where you can completely be someone new again and someone else, because no one has any expectations from you. And then you just go in and you do something, and that's the great thing about the US, for example, I believe, where you can try out different things for the first 2 years or something like this in your degrees. You can do different classes to figure out what you like, and then you meet people and all that good stuff, right? So it's a personal thing. However, what it doesn't do, and it didn't do that for me either, it didn't prepare me for the workplace at all, especially the workplace nowadays that, you probably hired people. I've been involved in the hiring of people. You really expect people to have experience, especially practical skills in certain areas. So let's take the example of marketing, because that's like sort of my background. I believe there's a big missed opportunity in universities to actually teach people, besides the theoretical understanding of how business works and consumer behavior, on some degrees of psychology, and also a little bit of high level technology understanding, and math, statistics, and all that, actual practical skills that when a marketing graduate goes out of university, what would they do? They probably become like marketing executives, social media executives, and so on. So they are expected to work and be able to work with the tools from day one. No one teaches you that at university, and it's actually the real educators in that space nowadays are not the educational institutions anymore, but it's the technology vendors, because they have
Mm,
whole academy schemes where
mm,
you can log in online and say, like, okay, I know if I well, that's my recommendation, at least for people. If you want to get into marketing and you're currently doing a marketing degree, get on the Facebook blueprint, go into Google Skills Shop, go into the HubSpot Academy, and there's I just That's a plot. Like I just started a blog on this. Actually, I'm calling it the Full Stack Marketeers 2 weeks ago, where I want to share all of this stuff going forward, because I feel there's so much good educational content out there for free from the tools that you are actually expect to use from day one. If you can show
Yeah,
people that you have the skills, so they don't need to teach you 6 months how to do that. I think that's a big missed opportunity, and this is where, for me, a little bit the disconnect comes in the educational space at the moment, for the, just as a disclaimer, non-medical and law
yeah,
professions, right? Where it's really about, like, you need to go in and apply some skills from day one, hard skills.
yeah. I think you're absolutely right, and I think the one of the reasons why maybe the educational institutes are slow to react, because it's the whole thing is formed in a curriculum that you can't change so often, because if you've got a marketing, I don't know, marketing discipline degree that's like 3 4 years, you need to take people, you need to have that curriculum running for a number of years or number of batches,
Mm,
to you know to even measure people against each other. But I think ultimately, if people are going into the education, to universities, etc. If you think that you're going to make lots of money, if you want to make lots of money, there are many different ways of doing that now, and more successful ways of doing it. And then the thing, um, and I think all the degree certificate gives you is tells your potential employer, um, your potential. But then I think choose an employer that kind of educates you in their academy or a
mm,
graduate scheme or some sort of thing. But like you said, um, you can do all of that. All of that education is open source. We've never been a better time in the world
yeah.
to make this stuff is so accessible. But I think ultimately, depending on the field you're in, you now don't even need the certificate. You just need to just dabble, and it's low enough to dabble, create your portfolio, create businesses. And even if you fail and they're not successful, that will be even more valuable to your potential employer.
But I feel
Um,
like, why don't you? Sorry to interrupt you, but I think it's an important one. Why don't you think this is an opportunity for universities to actually include that into their curriculum? Because, as you said, they still, you still need to have this thing where you can make people, where you can compare their performance. So, and build and teach them some theory. I do not argue
yeah,
against that at all, and have the campus experience. But why not now bring to 3 year degree what you had as a placement, just as, like, every semester has 2 months of uh, theory, but, or like 50% theory, but 50% you building. If you study business, you build your startup, and they
yeah,
even get funded through some sort of, like, government scheme, that when you come up with a good idea, you even get some money while you do that,
yeah.
to
I,
get it off the ground, because you always learn 10 times 10,000 times more during that time than studying
yeah.
another book and another book and another book.
I think, look, I think the reality is, and I'm really going to generalize here, right? I think the reality is that where top talent goes, right, those industries get better, become
Mm,
more innovative because of this ideas. I think, unfortunately, um, many, and this is where I think I'm generalizing, but I think on the broader scale, most of the educators and the lecturers in those institutions have all done the theoretical stuff, right?
mm,
they I think not many have gone out there, done it, built businesses, ran
yeah,
ran companies, and then come back to teach.
it's
Very
true.
small. And if they've done it at the kindness of their heart,
Mm,
and because they're not doing it for money. I think we have to also be honest with ourselves, is that educational institutions, teachers, lecturers, they don't get paid really well, right?
mm,
Um, you know, teachers, in an ideal world, should be paid the highest salary, right? And imagine what sort of people then that will attract. And once you
absolutely.
attract those people, you're going to start shaking the whole industry. But unfortunately, you know, um, teaching, it's such an important skill and a service to society, but unfortunately it doesn't reward well. I think many teachers struggle to make ends meet, and the amount of things that they need to go through, uh, and unfortunately, because that doesn't
Yeah.
attract the talent, it is a vicious cycle that keeps the education institute where it is. I don't know
Yeah, it's a
what
very
you.
the educator, the teachers, they're the fundamental. They're one of the most fundamental parts of the whole educational business model, right? And you're completely right. If that doesn't change, because there's people who go through like the academic career,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
do their PhD and they become professors, and they all
Researchers.
I completely they have their right to exist, and there's a lot of good teachers there. But yeah, I agree. Like, what if someone comes up with the idea, I'm gonna and to some extent there's these, you probably get those adverts all the time as well, like everyone now has a master class, like whether it's the previous like FBI negotiator or a
Yeah,
cook
yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever, all
yeah,
have their master class. But what about, let's stay close to our area, business and technology. What if some of the most successful entrepreneurs say, you know what, I've done it, and now I want to teach the next generation because I know how important it is for our society going forward. And they come together, and it's just like 20 of them, people who've built, big unicorn business or even not so big. And it's just like, okay, we put a curriculum together, and we're gonna let people enroll in our course online through a platform, and we're just gonna teach them hands-on skills that we used over the last 15 years to build some of the most successful business in the world, and then you make it available for everyone. And you also think about like what that would mean in terms of how then companies would, I think companies would probably accept that almost at equal weight in terms of,
yeah.
a degree at the end than people who graduated from Harvard. I don't know, like if
I think,
if the 15 most successful Harvard alumni are now suddenly going to teach what they've done in the last 20 years building some of the most successful businesses, where would you go? I would rather do their MBA than going to do a Harvard MBA.
yeah, and I think and I agree with that, and that course will be a lot better and more practical and useful. The thing is that that will still be on the fringes of the educational thing, just
Mm,
like we've got many offshoots and Khan Academy and everything like this. And I think ultimately these are volunteering type efforts, and successful people that have made it kind of do it because they want to give back, but it's not done at the institutional level, because ultimately I don't think it's yet, unfortunately, attracting the top talent, and it doesn't pay that well,
mm,
and I think ultimately, you know when you don't have to worry about bills and paying rent, etc., then that is where you start your best self really comes out, and you try and do that. So I think, going back to why is the educational system a little bit broken, why is it not changing, because there's so many great examples out there.
mm,
I think because the machine it still to a certain extent is working, so it's a money making machine. So let's
yeah.
keep it going. Second, I think the majority of the folks that are in that institution have not really run businesses or been a marketeer. They've been gone from curriculum to curriculum.
Mm.
They've had outside in speakers. They've had a curriculum influenced by certain industry bodies, etc. But ultimately, the core people that are running those things are still the educational, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, of course. But I think we've seen the value of, once you've done it and then you try and teach it, it's a whole different ball
Yeah,
game.
100%. And I think too, the other thing that has definitely also not really, there has been some innovation around the actual space where that education is provided, because in the traditional model, there was some constraint because there was only so much space in a lecturing hall that you can
Physical
actually get
space,
people in.
yeah.
But then that had the big advantage that, you know, you had to go there, you were with your peers, you had that 60-minute slot, maybe you then had some, you know, clinics afterwards, a math clinic, or, you know, tutorials and so on. So it hooked you in. It was a very sort of immersive experience, going to a physical space to get educated.
Mm.
um, and obviously, in order to overcome that and make it more accessible to other people, you bring it online, because then everyone can log in. You don't have the 150 seat capacity problem anymore. But
Yeah,
what
yeah.
happens, and I would love to see the stats on platforms like Coursera or edX, how many people start and actually finish a course.
True,
Because
true.
I have myself started courses because I got interested. You know what, I have a bit of time and I'm interested in history and I want to
And
learn.
what's your guess? What's your guess? Much lower, right? I would
I
say.
think it's 10%.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's actually,
Anything
I
that's
think
free, anything that starts off free,
you
you
start
get
exactly right.
five
You start and
people at
like,
the top.
whatever, I don't feel like it today, you know. And then you stop doing it, or you just sit in front of your laptop, and you know that was, we are obviously all now really sick of sitting in front of our
Mm,
laptops because of the pandemic. But even 2 years ago, if you just like sit in front of the laptop, isolated all by yourself, and just, you know, trying to get that stuff into your head, yeah, it has solved one problem of making it more accessible education to people. But in terms of creating a good online immersive educational experience, I don't think that has happened yet. I think
yeah,
that the human aspect with working with your peers and so on, that is so important. And just like bringing online content, educational content to the internet, and then expecting people, I just don't think that works. I think there's something missing, and there's still also on that edge, there's some innovation needed, similar to maybe that the teachers need to be different or better
yeah,
compensated or
yeah,
whatever. I think
yeah,
that how you bring education to people online more effectively, more immersive, more like inclusive, and that people have a sense of belonging, you know, I think
yeah.
that is also missing, and why maybe you know
I think you're right.
it will still take time to really kick off.
I think, yeah, I think whenever things become more accessible and they can happen at scale, um, you do lose that sense of one-to-one connection. You know, an intimate class of five,
Mm,
right, is going to be very different to a class of 1,000, and
yeah,
they can log in at any time they want. They just watch pre-recordings or
maybe
learn at
maybe
your
maybe
pace.
that's it, right? Rather than having 400 people that you usually were sitting in your lecturing hall, now suddenly all sitting on a Zoom call, because that's not going to work out.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
maybe you just build sort of small learning bubbles, and you know, that's the type of innovation, how you bring
yeah,
an
yeah,
immersive educational experience to the
yeah.
internet, and hence make it more
I
accessible.
I think I was also reflecting like what does it mean for me and my kids, right? So you know, my kids, the eldest is 10, soon going to be 11, and you know, we talk about all of this education. You know, it's about, okay, am I brave enough not to send my kids?
Yeah,
You know, that's ultimately where it comes down to. And to be honest with
it's a
you,
big question.
it's I am not I'm not I'm definitely running both tracks. So what I mean
Mm,
by this is that sending them to school, but I'm getting them to experiment, learn new skills, maybe start their own businesses and things like this. I think both tracks at this moment in time. But if you were to push me at this moment in time, uh, like would you send them to university? It's a question mark for me, because at this moment in time, there may be some value in it, but in
yeah.
10 years time, like I think, oh my god, I think we'll be in a different thing. So unlikely, I would say, unlikely.
Yeah,
So I've got both chips, both
I
two
get that.
horses in the race at the
Unless it has
moment.
probably really changed by then. And this, I think, one thing that might also then help you to finally convince yourself, if those announcements by companies around like how important it is to have a degree on your CV is not just like PR, but actually becomes reality, you know, where, because I
Exactly.
still think that some companies where say like, yeah, we don't really care if people went to university, if you have the skills and all, you know, we don't even care. We even like hide the university and the degree from the CV now automatically through our system. I'm like, are you really? Come on,
No, no,
guys.
no. I reckon education today, your degree, still has a role. Let's be, like you said, everyone's going through a bit of a PR exercise, and you know, I think they're being genuine about it. But even the folks recruiting, etc., this whole thing notion of picking people based on a portfolio only is also, you know, so I think it takes a while, a few cycles, to get to some sort of an evenly distributed, sort of manner. But it's the signs are there. I think anybody who's at any point of their education at this moment, uh, definitely, uh, learn yourself. There's abundance of knowledge out there. Create your own portfolio, start your own businesses. And if you're fortunate enough to go to college or university or anything like that, you know, continue doing that. But as soon as you start to see where you want to take your career, just then start to lean in
I think
on
that's
one
a
side.
I think that's a really good summary, because we should not underestimate how many people also go to university because they still need to figure out what they actually want to do, and
Very
then they
true.
should take that time to do it. But as you said, as soon as you have figured out this is what I want to do, this is my passion, and I also feel that I'm good at, build a portfolio. And if you then think you can skip university or cut it short, but you feel like you have a strong, you know, other certificate or type of thing in your hand so you can improve what you're good at, go for it, especially in
Yeah.
10 years time, when it becomes, well, earlier than that, probably more like in 7 years, when it
Five,
will.
7, I would say.
Yeah,
Five,
yeah. So
yeah.
no, good. I think it's a super interesting space. I think, you know, learning in general, you know, for me at least, is not something that stopped at university or after
No.
university. For me, it feels like it really just started after university.
Yeah.
I think lifelong learning is such an incredible, important thing. And especially in our area, staying up to date with the latest, is not being taught, that makes you employable, you know, and it will, is not something that is taught yet in university. It's taught by other companies and other people out there, so it's worthwhile go out to find those people and stay
Yeah.
ahead of the curve.
Definitely.
Cool.
Cool.
All right, I think we at the end. It's a good
Yeah.
point to end. So thanks everyone, as always, for listening. If you're on YouTube, consider subscribing, leave us a comment and a like. That's really helpful for us. If you're on LinkedIn, as always, if you have any thoughts, if you disagree with us or you agree with us, let us know in the comments, start a conversation, reach out via email. Also, if you're on Spotify, please download the podcast or share it with a friend. We'll be here next week. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and we see you then. Bye.
Peace. Yeah.